Welcome to ThinkWise. With this first episode, we really just want to introduce ourselves to you guys, tell us who we are and kind of our why behind this podcast and how the idea came to be. So my name's Christian. I'm a student at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in marketing, and I'm currently working on my master's in organizational and industrial psychology. And I also run cross country and track in college.
Yeah, and I'm Richard Fagerlin, Christian's dad, and I have for the last 20 years been operating and running a management consulting firm. We do leadership development, strategic planning, executive coaching. We get to work with leaders from all over the world, from all different types and sizes and shapes.
Yeah, so Dad, I've always told you that you should start a podcast, right? And you haven't always loved that idea.
Yeah, well, it was like 6 or 7 years ago, one of the guys I worked with, Grant Barron, said to me, "You need to do a podcast." And I'm like, literally, the world does not need another podcast. And here we are, 7 years later, there's over 4 million podcasts. And, I don't know that the world needs another podcast, but I do think that the world needs a voice in some areas that places where things want to happen or need to happen.
Yeah, so it's been a few years that I've been telling my dad he should start a podcast, but it wasn't until a few months ago that I had the idea of doing this particular podcast together. And it was through a school project that I had where I had to interview my dad, and I went back and listened to it, and I was like, this would have been an awesome podcast episode. So then it kind of got us brainstorming for the next few months. Like, we'd love to have cool conversations together, but not necessarily knowing about what or to who are we talking to. So let's talk a little bit more about how we kind of came to the specific audience and specific goals of this podcast.
Yeah. Well, you're a college athlete, and we have interest in athletes. We got a lot of our energy and effort goes to watching professional sports. And so originally we thought there is a direct connection between what athletes experience at whatever level, high school, college, pro, and what professionals in the workplace experience. And the more we started talking about that, and the more I'm hanging out with you and your friends and young leaders that I work with, the more we realize actually there's the specific chasm that exists between seasoned professionals and young professionals is significant. And really that's where we want to hone the energy of this podcast into, is helping young professionals seize the opportunities that are in front of them and to take all the many, many ideas that they have and actually turn those into action. So as we were brainstorming this, we're in my office and we start writing up all of these ideas of what we could talk about and what are those issues that young professionals are thinking. And then you had a comment that I think was absolutely critical to the whole foundation and kind of the genesis of this podcast. What was your thought?
Yeah, so we were going through kind of trying to come up with a list of all the things we talk about that young professionals need to hear about and need to talk about more. And I've personally read tons of business books and listened to podcasts and consumed lots of content to the point where, as we were coming up with this list, I found myself saying, man, I feel like I could give a TED talk on all these topics. But then it kind of hit me. I lack a lot of experience and authority still. I'm only 22 and in college. And the fact that I felt like I could speak to a lot of these topics at a really high level showed me that my generation has a problem of consuming a lot of content and not necessarily putting those ideas into action. And so that's really what we want this podcast to aim to be, is a place where it's not just more ideas for you to consume, but actionable steps that you can actually implement into your life.
Well, and isn't it fair to say that like your peers, your generation, and maybe even those up to 10 or 15 years older than you, there's an idea, like people are idolizing content creators and influencers. Yeah. And so you get these, 2-minute experts. Someone's video goes viral. It's a 2-minute video and they show an expertise in something and it gets millions of views, but yet they may not know how to or ever have actually done what that video is about. Is that fair?
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about like the dopamine and what goes on in our brains when we're consuming all these great ideas, and it makes us feel like we're accomplishing them. And it's definitely, it has the potential of creating quite a problem where people my age feel entitled to success because they learn so much about it.
Well, we entered into a fun exercise prior to launching the podcast. We both reached out to our own networks and asked some questions like, hey, what would you like to hear in this? But also, what are the challenges you face? So maybe just speak to a couple of the challenges that you saw as a consistent theme within the young people. So you're talking people that are, you know, either just graduated to within a decade of being in the workplace. What were some of the feedback that you got?
Yeah, consistently, a lot of the feedback was just people feeling like they didn't learn things in school that actually prepared them for the real world. And whether that's just what it's like working in an office, how to negotiate your salary, how to work with coworkers you don't get along with, things like that. And there were also a lot of topics specifically relating to COVID and the pandemic that I think have, a lot of kids my age expect to work from home now and do everything from home and not have to go anywhere. And so I think there's definitely a lot of unique struggles and challenges that my generation's facing.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting because when I listen to the feedback I'm getting from my peers and from business leaders and CEOs that I reached out to with the same set of questions and was like, what are you seeing as the challenge? Basically, bottom line, all of them were saying, just show up, like do good work, have a good attitude, have a good mindset. And it's like all the simple things. So I think drawing these together and making it so that one, we understand the desire to do big things and great things and to be efficient with your time and not have to go into an office, and the simple blocking and tackling that's required to be successful really is simple blocking and tackling. So we want to put those two together and help people see, that it's not all that hard to turn those ideas into action. It takes specific focus and energy, and we want to put people in front of others who have gone before them, not to tell their success story. That's what TikTok and Instagram and all of social media is for everyone to tell their success story. What we want to be able to talk about is the grind behind the grind, the failures that lead to these success, the effort and energy that it takes to get to the top of Mount Everest, not just the picture at the top of Mount Everest. Fair?
Yes, definitely. And I think at the end of the day, we want this podcast to bridge the gap between young people who have a lot of ideas and older, more experienced people who have actually implemented these ideas into their lives. And, we really want this podcast to be something that focuses on finding your priorities just overall in your life, not just career. Because at the end of the day, what's the point of working hard and grinding a ton if you're not enjoying your life? So we want that to be the overarching umbrella of everything we talk about on this show.
So maybe a little bit about the name. ThinkWise, in the work that we do at Peak Solutions, we're always trying to figure out what's the scarce resource, what's missing with the team, what's missing with the organization, what's missing with the individual. And so these two words, we believe, are the scarce resource for young professionals today. It's not just about thinking, it's about thinking critically, it's about thinking wisely. Oftentimes we'll tell our clients that you don't hire us because of what we do, you hire us because of how we think. And how you think is way more important than actually what you do. So that's one of the things we want to draw others to, is to grow and build assets in that very, very scarce resource of thinking critically and wisely. And then the last part is about that wisdom. Wisdom comes a couple of ways. It comes from birthdays, and the more you have them, the greater chance you have of growing wisdom. And the other way you grow wisdom is by getting your teeth kicked in, by having challenges, by falling down and getting back up again. I grew up on a ranch, and I rode horseback for most of my childhood. And every time I'd get bucked off a horse or fall off, my mom was right there. Like, you get back up on that thing, and you get back up, and you fight through that adversity. And part of that is to show yourself, but part of it is to show the horse that you're going to stick to this. So that focus of being able to grow that wisdom through our challenges, through other people's challenges. So we want to think strategically. We want to grow wisdom. So ThinkWise podcast, helping young professionals bridge that gap between their ideas and being able to put them into action, is what we're focusing on.
Yeah, I love it. This conversation gets me really excited to get this ball rolling and start to learn how to think more wisely. So hopefully you too, that if you're listening, gets you excited. And yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, we want this podcast to bridge the gap between young people who have a lot of ideas and older people who have implemented these ideas.